Hello, everyone. My name is Paul Wilshaw, and today I'm speaking to Mr. Daniel Foulds, who is a writer and researcher and director, and an associate artist at Mind the Gap Theatre Company, and a great friend of mine who has his first show as a writer and director going on tour in the next month, A Hidden History. Firstly, Dan, thank you so much for doing this interview.
Pleasure as always.
So, my first question is, what made you want to get into theatre? And at school, where were you encouraged to get into it?
I got into theatre through Mind the Gap's summer schemes and outreach programs when I was 12 or 13, I think it was. And I just really, really enjoyed the various different sessions, the camaraderie, the feeling of being an equal in a setting as well. Even though you were still technically a child, you did get treated more of a peer, if that makes sense. And that
Yeah,
kind of feeling and the fun of doing creative things on top of that was really freeing and really, really fun. And then when I was at school, I got the opportunity when they did the co-location things in Bradford. In particular, I got the opportunity to go through to Beckfoot's school and was able to do a BTEC performing arts, which I really, really loved, and ended up with fairly good grades and learned an awful lot before my journey onto Mind the Gap.
okay, brilliant. So, you're doing a project called A Hidden History. So, my question is, did you like doing history at school? And if so, what was your favourite time period and why?
Well, uh, I of course I've loved history ever since I was 8 years old when I first picked up a book that had pictures of pyramids in it, and just got hooked from there onwards. In terms of my favourite time period in history, I would say anywhere from 5000 BC up to 300, up to I believe it's 300 AD. No, 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 no. Oh no, yeah. 14 BC. Any time between that period for the historical for ancient Egypt. I've loved and loved and loved. It's just that broad expanse of history of the dawn of civilization and the lives of the ancients, and yeah, I just love that. But as I'm not particularly one for traveling, and also I have a very bad fear of snakes and things with poison in it. I decided to have a little look at history close to home, and I really, really got into the history of the Civil War in the UK, the English Civil War. And from then onwards, I just read and read and read, looked at various different cities, grew a huge obsession with York, and that just grew to other time periods, and it's just spiraled on. There's never an end to the amount you can learn from history.
Certainly not. I love history also, so I totally get that. Um, I'm interested. What made you want to write a Hidden Histories? And who has been your favourite character to write about?
What made me get into history, what made me want to write hidden histories was that a lack, particularly in Bradford, of local pride in the city itself. And not many people really know the history of Bradford. They just think it's all about the mill industry. And actually, there's an awful lot of other people apart from the mill owners that made Bradford the city it is. And those people were just average people like you and me, who just had good ideas, good intentions. And I wanted to get their voices shown. And I thought to myself, how can we get these stories across to people, particularly the young folk? Because I'm very keen that young people get interested in their local history. And I wanted, and after seeing a number of different pieces of theatre, not least Brief Encounters, which looked at real people's voices, Bradford Interchange and just a variety of scenarios and how to move it in a location that wasn't a theatre setting. And that got me really thinking about how can you do that, but then also throw in the history as well. I watched a number of various things at like York Museums, at Fairfax House in York, all which are promenade theatre historical pieces. And through their inspiration, I managed to create a template for hidden history in Bradford. And this year, throughout the next month, and over the last 2 years, we've been creating this template for other locations. In this case, Halifax at the Peace Hall and Elsker Heritage Centre in Elsker near Barnsley, and to bring some of their local history back to life.
And what's your favourite character?
Ooh, as a writer, I felt a huge connection to the Edgar story at Elsker Heritage Centre, partly because of the character himself being possibly learning disabled, and being a part of the asylum, who was locked up in an asylum for 53 years and had his voice silenced. Now, I'm fairly sure I'm not alone in saying on Disability Arts Online that we all know that disabled voices can sometimes be hidden and sometimes silenced. So I really wanted to get his voice known and remembered. And I felt a really deep emotional connection with Edgar for writing his story and trying to open up the truth about why he was sent to the asylum.
Okay, thank you for that. On your webpage, you quote as saying originally, I was told that because of my disability, I would never be able to write very well. So I decided to change that and try as hard as I could and just sat in the corners sometimes and wrote little short stories. Slowly but surely, I got better and better at writing short stories. I moved on to poetry, then to long feature length novels, then finally to script writing. I was wondering, have you ever gone back to the places and people who said you would never be able to write very well and said, I proved you wrong? And if so, why was that important to you? And if not, what do you think of the statement now?
Unfortunately, I haven't gone back and kind of gloated. I'm not sure. Am I allowed to name and shame schools here?
I wouldn't name and shame, but
Okay. So, let's say that the teacher, Mrs. W, was the perpetrator for this, and I was just very simply a 5-year-old, just coming from another school, and I was sat down trying to catch up because I'd had a transition to another school, which took up quite a number of months. So I was already a little bit behind, not good. And after a few months of being at that school, they just kind of, because they knew I had a disability and a learning disability, they just kind of couldn't be bothered, to be honest. Is what the impression I got on hindsight. And I would love to have gone back to school and named and shamed that particular teacher and just said, your teaching method was absolutely awful. I'm a writer now. You were completely and utterly wrong. Unfortunately, can't do that. Can't do that because she doesn't work there anymore. I think the whole staffing situation has changed at that particular school, so there's no point in going back to that particular school, to be honest. So,
okay.
but if I could, I would. I think is the answer to that.
And do you think there's a stigma then, like you said about schools? Do you think there's a stigma around if you say you've got a learning disability? And if so, how do you think we can change that and change the narrative of what a theatre and what people can do?
Oh, I think there's definitely a stigma attached to having a learning disability, even in very little ways, just as when you're out in the community and things like that. I know for a fact that I try to hide my learning disability as well as I can, but as a result, it makes me look very anxious. But the way we can move forward is by doing various things like continue with our arts practice, continuing to prove that we are able artists in our own rights. Our learning disability or disability doesn't define us. It is just a part of who we are, and we can live with it, and we live with it. It is not our definition of our identity.
I totally agree with you on that. You were a researcher on Mind the Gaps project at Zara. Can you tell us about your experience of working on that project and what it's like actually to be a researcher with a learning disability? And how do you think we can get more people with a learning disability into that field?
Oh, very good question. Yes, I worked for, as you said, my time with Zara. It wasn't exclusively with Zara. It was for the full 5 years of research for Daughters of Fortune as a whole. My particular pathway was that I met at Mind the Gap the co-researcher Mary Cooper, non-LD researcher with 35 plus years of experience of interviewing and writing. After a couple of interviews to begin with, I kind of just getting my feels for how you do things, how to conduct an interview, how to ask the right questions without triggering any kind of issues or problems that could happen or bring any bad memories back to the interviewee because of the nature of the particular subject matter we were talking about. In this case, just to give clarity to potential child removal. And after a while in listening to it, you start to kind of understand, kind of take away some of your personal opinion and bias, and then you go forward and try and learn more and just get these voices out and about through very, very simple ways, such as just simple statements of what the parents have said. For actually getting the information and withholding it, like an awful lot of other LD people, I do struggle to retain fresh information straight away on the short-term memory side of things. So what I recommend people do is just bring a recorder. If you can get permission from the interviewee, record it, listen back to it, garner back the information you've just heard, and just make sure that you're very clear on the information you are being given. I think a big part of it is be patient and know that you will get it wrong, especially at the beginning, and that is good. Getting things wrong is a good thing because it means you're learning.
Okay.
And that is what I would really, really harshly say to anyone who's interested in getting into researching and writing.
Okay, thanks for that. And on your webpage, it says you have been awarded a Develop Your Own Practice grant from the Arts Council. First of all, congratulations on that. And it says you'll be writing a new piece called In Neither Camp. Please can you tell us about that?
A very interesting question. Yes, In Neither Camp is a new project that is completely different to what I have written before or going to write, looking at the topic of learning disability in a different light, because I am very articulate and sometimes and hang around in various different settings with various different people. I've never really felt part of the learning disabled community, nor the LD community. And therefore, I kind of felt like I'm in neither camp for where my placement is with trying to meet new people. And as a result, I think to myself, I can't be the only person who feels that way, because no one is alone in anything that they feel. That is a very important thing to remember. Never feel like you're alone. And as a result, I kind of want to share my experiences to hopefully get this conversation going, that just because you have a learning disability, it doesn't make you an oddity, and break down those barriers with the LD community or the non-LD community, and just see people as people but also to be able to unpack things and be able to articulate, look, I feel like I'm a loner, and that is okay, but I want to do something about it as well.
Okay.
And I wanted to do and with my DYCP, I wanted to try different type of writing styles to try and talk this out, either through short stories, through monologues, through blogs, through potential radio plays, that sort of thing, just to really give a feel for how I could write this out and try and untangle things especially on a personal level, out for people to hear, listen, enjoy, and think about.
Thank you for that. And how can people buy tickets to your shows?
Okay, there are two. Well, there are two different ways. The simplest one would be to go on to danieljfoulds.com and look in events on the web page, and for each individual performance of Bradford, Halifax, and Elsica, there is a link to where you can buy tickets. And there are still tickets available for each of them, so please buy away. And also there is also on the Peace Hall website, they've very kindly been doing quite a lot of the ticket sales through their way, and you can purchase tickets through there, and those are the ways. Please buy away. You are more than welcome.
Okay, so thank you so much for this interview, Dan. Really do appreciate it. It's really interesting to hear about your story and how you got into this. And I'm sure that we will hear a lot more from you. So thanks once again, and take care.
Thank you very much.